All right. Good evening. Today we're learning Maseches Bava Basra Daf Kuf Mem Beis, and much of Kuf Mem Gimel Amud Aleph. Will be stopping about 2/3 of the way down. Tomorrow, no shiur. Obviously, it's Friday. Shabbos, I'm here. Sunday, Monday, I'm out of town, and I've asked my handler to take over just to make it easier on all of you and me. Mostly for me. I love you guys, but no, he's just been a stellar support actually of just hopping in as necessary. He almost never says no, and he's great. So today we're starting really pretty much at the top of the page, and we're in the middle of a sugya of whether or not one can be mizake to a fetus. So a woman's pregnant, and let's say, the grandmother says, "I'm gifting $1 million to in vitro to your baby in utero." So does that work? Can a baby who is part of the mother's body make a kinyan?
That will make it work.
If you're a yid, there's a way, like it'll be a matana. Yeah, we'll figure it out. We'll figure it out. So we're actually going to start mid-sentence here on the second line. Even if a person gifts money to a baby by saying, "I know you're pregnant now, but I meant for when the baby was born," lo kana. Rav Huna was of the opinion that until the baby's born, you're out of luck. There's no way to make a transaction like that. To Amar Rav Nachman hamazaka ubar lo kana and lichasheteled kana. But Rav Nachman disagreed. Rav Nachman held that lichasheteled does work, in fact. Rav Huna Amar af lichasheteled lo kana. No, it makes no difference. Even lichasheteled doesn't work. Rav Sheshes Amar echad zeh ve'echad zeh kana. Doesn't matter what you do. All of a sudden you pass like Rav Huna, like Rav Sheshes. $1 million, I hold like Rav Sheshes. I'm happy to be a fair weather fan. No, obviously that's not how Jews roll, not how from Jews roll. At least we should be asking shilas. And if you're not ready to ask the shilah, don't ask the shilah. But if you're going to ask the shilah, then you got to listen to the answer. Otherwise, you're just not being so from. And I get it. So that's the machlokes that we have here, the multi-shita machlokes about whether or not one can be makna to an ubar, bimei imo. And Amar Rav Sheshes wants to teach us, where do I get my shita from? Says, Rav Sheshes said an ubar, we can't be mezaka to an ubar, says the Gemara D'Tanya, we have a brisa. This is a brisa that is in Maseches Ksubis. And the brisa says as follows, Ger Shemes. If a ger passes away, what's the one thing a ger is lacking in this stage of his life? Family. He has no next of kin that are on the goyish side of things. The only way he would have next of kin is if he has children, if he has a wife, if he has something going on. And a wife is not really one that he's yorish to. So ger shemesh.
Are they still not related?
I think they're not related. I think so. I'm just wondering if they convert at the same time, would that be? But I don't think they're related.
Like a brand newborn baby.
Yeah, I don't think there's any relationship. Certainly, if they're not, I'm just postulating. I'm just wondering if. Yeah, I don't think so. My hunch is that they're not related at all. Not even brothers. Like you can marry your sister if you like.
We still use like that.
Yeah, in Yavamas.
Kind of frowned upon.
Yeah.
Like that.
Also, like genetic pool, it's also frowned upon.
Right,
It's l'chora, there's other considerations. Yeah.
Hashem there was definitely like coal.
Yeah.
Yes. Indeed, it means that Avram had a daughter. Why did he have to send Eliezer halfway across the world to find a wife for Yitzchak, Ben-Noah, and he would marry his sister? Like, why look any farther?
What was the answer?
A couple of answers. One of them was maybe it was Hagar's kid, and therefore he wouldn't have been interesting to him anyway. Well, we don't know if Sarah had a child.
Right.
I wouldn't make this up.
I wouldn't accuse you of doing so.
Which is interesting because how
Rivka.
Right.
Yeah. Below. No, that first answer is not because she's too young. It's she was young and didn't want to marry.
Or he didn't want to marry her off at that young.
Below Ratza Adain Lahasiya. Okay. Inami Mehagar Haisa. Let me see. Good interruption. Clearly. Yeah. Yeah, there's an extra thing is going on here. It's not just the din, it's also, right and wrong. So let's talk about a case of ger shemes, and this is going to be a raya for Rav Sheshes. If a ger dies and he has no next of kin, you can take his property. It's hefker. Nobody owns it. It's not stealing. It's for the taking. So ubizbezu Yisrael nechasav, and they grabbed onto his kalim. They saw he had a nice car. The ger died. Go into the house, take the keys to the Mercedes. The car doesn't belong to anybody. It's mamash hefker. And then vishamu sheyesh lo ben. Then they heard a rumor that after he was megayer, he had a son. Oh, shaisa ishto meuberes. Or his wife, maybe when he died, she wasn't showing, and then the next time he saw her in jewels, she was showing. Uh-oh, I took the guy's car, but she's expecting. So next of kin could be that baby for when he's born. Fine. So chayav and lahachzir. The halacha is if you're mavazbeis, if you take the rechush of the ger, and then you find out that potentially he has some type of yoresh, either a ben already or an ubar, and this is where our argument's going to start coming in. The halacha is you have to be machzir. So yichzir, you bring everything back. You say to his wife, sorry about that, I didn't realize you were expecting. And of course, if you have a boy or if you have a girl, it would be deserving for your children to get the Yerusha from your husband who's a ger. And then they heard that either Nebuch, if the son who was alive passed away, or that she miscarried, and now there's no next of kin again. So what's allowed to happen again? It can be mavazbeis. You can go take whatever you want from the ger. So hechzik b'shniya kana. The second people who go grab onto these items, they are kona. Uverishona lo kana. The first guy, so let's say Ruvain was the one who was there on day one. Oh, he died? Okay, cars for me. Then he returned it when he found out the wife was pregnant. And then another person chapta rang when they found out that she miscarried. So what's the din? So we said that the hichzik b'shniya kana, the second guy, why is the second guy kona? Why isn't the first guy kona? After all, if she was only pregnant and it was only an ubar, so then why wouldn't it be his? Because after all, you can't be mezaka to an ubar. Bisal kadaitach ubar lo kani. If you want to say that an ubar can't be kona in utero, lama luach zuke b'shniya. Why is it that the kinyan was only chal on the second person? It should be that the kinyan was, if there was a son, that part of the Tosefta is not what we're talking about, only if it was ubar. So then why would it be that case? The first guy already made the kinyan. That's very nice. Reuven made the kinyan on January 1st. Shimon came in and made a kinyan on January 10th after he heard that she miscarried. So that means that the first guy was Kona. Elamai, it must be that there is such a thing as a kinyan, that there is such a thing as being mezaka l'ubar. So that's how Rav Sheshes proves his shita. Because Rav Sheshes was of the opinion that echad zeh ve'echad zeh, both in a case of an ubar and in a case where he says when the baby is born, he'll say that you can be mezakal ubar. So how do the other shitas get out of this pickle? Because he's given a pretty good argument. We see that just the pregnancy alone made the kinyan of the first guy to not be chal. Beautiful. So 2/3 of the way down, Amar Abai, we'll see two answers to this question. Yerusha ba me'eleha shiny. So the Gemara here says there's a difference between a general case of mezaka le'ubar, where the grandmother is being mezaka to the child of her pregnant granddaughter, right? So she sees her granddaughter with a little belly, and she says, "Oh, my Zis granddaughter, I'm giving $1 million to that fetus inside to your baby." So that is a case of mezaka le'ubar. That's very different than Yerusha ba me'eleha. And that's Abaye's distinction, is that Yerusha ba me'eleha is more powerful and it's more natural and it is chal. That means that we make the following distinction. When we talk about being mezaka le'ubar from a non-parent to an ubar, that doesn't work. Mezaka le'ubar is lo kana. However, when the relationship between the ubar and the money is Yerusha, then it's chal. That's how we would distinguish against Rav Sheshes. All of that is answer number one, that Yerusha ba me'eleha shiny. I just want to highlight that this is a fascinating halachic sugya in regards to the laws of kinyanim. Because what that means, that the same exact action was done, but it was chal in one case and not chal in the other. When Aunt Betsy tries to be mizaka to a great niece, that's not chal. Same mechanics. Hooray that I'm going to be mizaka to the baby $1 million. So that doesn't work. But when a father does it, it works. Why? So there's something, Yerusha, there's something there that makes it work. But the reason that's difficult is because the concern of the Shita of being Mizaka Ubar is that the baby is not born yet. How are you Mizaka to something that isn't even in the world? Why does that not apply to Yerusha as well? That's where the Rishonim come in. So this is where our conversation ends, and Rishonim would jump in here to say, well, here's the reason. You'll see, I'm sure Shita is Lakan or Lakan, but it's a fascinating, really, just a very interesting divide that we say that when it comes to a Yerusha, that you can be Mizaka Ubar. But when it's not Yerusha oriented, when it's a more distant relationship, so then Mizaka Ubar is Lokan. Rava, however, gives a totally different answer and one that wouldn't engage the questions that I just posed. Rava says, Abaye, I don't agree with you. Shiny hasam de rafui merafian biadayu meikara. The case was where the kinyan that was initially made was very weak, a rifyon. My high, what happened? So a ger dies, and this guy walks over to the property. He's like, all right, I'll go shopping in the house. Like, I'll take, he's a ger. He doesn't have family. Everything's Hefker. I'm going to go take something. So Rava gives this svara that the original kinyan wasn't a stark kinyan. That's what he says. Shani hasam de rafoy marfion biadaihu meikara. That when the first group of people made their kinyan, they did so in a very, very weak way. Take a look at the Rashbam, the first of the middle width lines. V'Rava Amar la'olam eimalach loshna mezakel ubar loshna Yerusha ba me'aleha lo kana klal. V'shayni hasam gabe hamachzik barishona. The first guy who grabbed the ger's products was a little different. De lo kana lav mishum ubarhu da'ein ubar yoresh. Elam eikara k'sheich ziku rafui merafyon biadayu k'shemes hager bizbezun nechasab. And he grabbed it. Lo niskatnu lachtik v'gamre. He wasn't sure if the Kenyan was full. Da misafka lahu im yesh lo yorshin imav. This is a weird answer. It's either a Kenyan or
He's taking it, hoping he gets to hold on to it, maybe with the realization, but those are dvarim shebelev, right?
Not just that, you shouldn't take it if you're Masupak, if there's a child, but that's just not right. That might be Geneva. That's a suffix Yisur Daraisa.
Okay, fine.
Yeah.
But that's also in Kinyanim works.
Wow.
One steal.
Yeah, it works. It works.
Right?
Yeah.
It's not a good thing.
It's an Yisur Daraisa.
Right.
And in fact, might trigger Beheshives Agzela Asher Gaza, Lav Nitak Lasik. So here, Rava is giving this middle of the road answer that the kinyan that the first person made was like poorly done.
Yeah.
So I would have argued the threshold of the front door, Hagabah, I don't know, 1,000 different things I could have argued. But I just can't, again, I'm with you. I can't imagine a scenario where we don't just look at the quality of the kinyan. What did you do? Tachlis, what did you do?
What you're thinking shouldn't happen.
Yeah. Okay, both of these answers are shver and difficult. I don't mean shver in a denigrating way. I just don't understand them. I'm just saying I don't.
Give me a week and I'm sure
we'll figure it out. So the Gemara takes these two answers and says, "My beinahu." What's the difference between Abaye's answer of Yerusha Bame Leha Shaini? That's different than the case of Mizakel Ubar, and the answer of Rava that the kinyan was Rafui Merafyam. Says the Gemara, Ika Beinahu, the difference is like this. Let's remove the suffix of Rava. How do we do that? Sheshamu bo shemes. They taka heard. The Ubar passed away, the child died. Now he's a ger with no yorshim at all. Now, when he makes the kinyan, oh, that's a full kinyan. The low mace, but in fact, the information was wrong. So here's the flow of events. They announce the death of this woman's child. The ger dies, has a Jewish wife, no kids, and then they say the child died. So the guy says everything's hefker. I'm going to go take something. He takes something, and then really taka velomes. Really, it was misinformation. They said that this kid's name, it was a different kid. The achar kachmes, and only he died later. Oh, so that's where we see a difference between Rava and Abaye. Rava would say that's mamish full kinyan, because the whole concern initially was it was a suffix whether or not the ger had any viable living children. When they announced that that child was dead, and then the guy goes in, it's not rough with me at Rafian. He made a full kinyan, a full kavana. Your question notwithstanding about Dvarim Shebelev, it's a full kinyan. So that would be the difference between Abaye and Rava. So Rava would say that's a full kinyan, and Abaye would say no, it's not. He would say Yerusha Bamei Shiny. In those cases are different. Very good. All that is sugya number 1 for tonight. Sugya number 2, difficult brisa. Tashma, we have a brisa that is in Maseches Erchen and Nida. Says the Gemara, Tinok ben yom echad nochel umanchil. The brisa says if there's a baby that's 1 day old, he can be nochel, he can inherit, pashut, he can inherit. He can also be manchil. That means if on day 1 he is alive, his father dies, he gets a Yerusha. If he then dies, then another next of kin of his will, again, what's the next of kin of a 1 day old? Sister, whatever the details are. But he's manchil as well. What's the diuk from this brisa, from Erchen? Ben yom echad in ubar lo. What we see over here is that you cannot be mizake to an ubar, because when are you nochel umanchil? You're only nochel umanchil if you're ben yom echad, but if you're an ubar, you're not. So this is a kasha as we look up to the top of the page on a couple of shitas. We saw the shita of Rav Nachman that if the language of the Kenyan was lichashetele that you're kona, and even more difficult is the shita of Rav Sheshes, who said no matter what happens, ubar is kona. How is that possible with this brisa? This brisa seems to be perfectly clear. Ben yom echad nochel umanchil, which means ubar no way. It's only a tinok ben yom echad. So that's a kasha in Rav Sheshes and others. Says Rav Sheshes, I'll answer for you. You've totally misunderstood this brisa. You read it like a balabas, not like a Talmud Chacham. But the words that you're looking at are not what you think they are. Let's look at the brisa. Tinok ben yom echad nochel umanchil. Amar Rav Sheshes, nochel benichse ha'em. He is able to inherit from his mother, and this 1 day old child will be nochel, and also lahanchil la'achin min ha'av. A huge chiddush. That if a child is 1 day old, and his father is not alive, his father's not alive, but his mother had him, and then whatever he got from his mother, he got. And he had brothers from another father. So then you can give it over. That's what it says. He can be lahanchil la'achin min ha'ab. So this brisa of 5 words, 6 words of tinok ben yomecha nochel umanchil isn't talking about whether or not you can be mezakel ubar. It's talking about a complex case where the 1 day old was nochel from the mother and was manchil to the brothers from the father's side, from a different marriage. I mean, they're half siblings. And v'dafka ben yom echad abal ubar lo. And in that case, when can he be manchil? When can he be lahanchil la'achim min ha'ab? That's only if he's 1 day old but not an ubar. My taima. And we turn to the top of Kuf Mem Beis with a very difficult nuance in the death process of a woman who dies while she's pregnant. Nebuch. Dehu mayis beresha. Oy, terrible things. The Gemara says that if a woman dies, actually the baby dies first. And then in that case, and this nuanced din of the brisa that Rav Sheshes is now explaining is that the 1 day old inherits from the mother as a nochel, and then he's manchil to the brothers from the father's side. That can only happen if the child was taka born, but not if he's an ubar. But you cannot learn from here whether or not, in general, we're going to be mezakil ubar. Says the Gemara, I'm sorry, I hate to bring up the bad news, but that's actually not how things work. Sometimes the mother dies, and the ubar lives a little bit longer, not earlier. Says the Gemara, Lememra, are you trying to say, second line on Kuf Mem Beis and Beis, Lememra, are you trying to say the hu ma'is beresha that the ubar dies first? V'ha'hava uvda. There was a case where the woman died while she was pregnant. Upirches tlasa pirchuse, and we saw the baby moving in the stomach 3 times after her death was called. So that means that babies don't die first when the mother's pregnant. That means that the mother dies first and not the baby, and that's a nafkamina l'maisa. If the baby dies first, okay, he's not part of the Yerusha. But if the mother dies first and the uber is zochet, then he's mezakeh in utero. So the Gemara says, we see over here that the mother dies first and the baby dies second. Says the Gemara, no. Amar mar baravashi, midi dehave azanav halta'a shemefarcheses. This is no different, says the Gemara, than the tail of a lizard that moves after it's cut off. We have spent many an hour fishing in my family. You cut a worm in half, both halves move. Not for long, but both halves do move. Do they regrow? I don't think worms regrow. Starfish regrow. They're regenerative. There are some things that regrow when you cut them. I wonder how small of a thing would regrow from a starfish. Is it any? It's got to be some minimum, no? I don't know. Let's try it. Oh, I'll pass. It's a good study. Nothing that ChatGPT cannot answer. So the Gemara says you cannot bring a raya from pirchus, from the shaking afterwards. You can't do that. By the way, fascinating nafkamina for a Jew and for a non-Jew in regards to the Isser D'Oraisa of Aver Minachai. When does Aver Minachai start for a Yid, and when does it stop for a Yid, and when does it stop for a Goy? So by a Yid, we have the mitzvah of Shchita. So the second you do Shchita, the Isser of Aver Minachai disappears. But by a Goy, where a Goy does not have a mitzvah of Shchita, the Isser of Aver Minachai stops when the body stops moving. So let's call it a 1 minute delay, 2 minute delay from Shchita to stopping the pirchus of shaking. That time is a nafkamina of when the Isser of Aver Minachai applies to the Yid and the Goy. It's fascinating. It also means that there's a chumrah by a Goy that doesn't apply by a Yid, because they're restricted, and for us it's mutter. It's very, again, unique halachos. Next, another possible way to answer this cryptic Mishnah. We already answered up one way, that the case was nochil b'nichse ha'em lahanchil la'achin min ha'ab. Says the Gemara 5 lines down. Mar berei de Rabbi Yosef mishmei de Rava gives another answer. Amar, he says lomar shemamayit bechelek bechoro. What we're talking about in that brisa is just reducing the portion that is due to a bechor. What that means is if he's ben yom echad, then he gets full bechor. He's nochel umanchil. But if it's an ubar, then he doesn't get pishnayim. Let's see how this is explained in the Gemara. The dafka ben yom echad, aval ubar lo my time, because the primary pasuk of Yerusha says v'yaldu lo amar rachmana to amar mar bered Rabbi Yosef mishmei de Rabba ben shenolad la'achar misas aviv eino mamayit bechelek bechora. A son who's born after the death of the father. My time of. So the Gemara says again, answer number 2, this brisa is talking about apples and oranges. And in a parallel universe, that's how we learned it, Basura Masnu Hachi, but Bepumpadisa Masnu Hachi, we learned it a little bit different. Amar Mar Berei de Rabbi Yosef, Mishmei de Rava. A third of the way down on Kuf Mem Beis Lamid Beis. Bechor Shenolad La'achar Misas Aviv. If a son dies after, if a son is born after the death of his father, Eino Notel Pishnayim, it's too late. You missed the window, right? By a minute, whatever the case may be. My taima. What is the reason why this is true? Because Yakir Amar Rachman of Halesa de Yakir. There has to be a hakara. Doesn't mean actually have to be a hakara. You have to see his child. I don't know. I don't think that's what it means. A capacity to be Yakir.
That's it's what we saw like last week.
Correct.
Breaking down that pasuk word by word.
Yeah.
So same thing of like Havaya, the same thing here. He has to be able to be Yakir.
Conceptually, not literally. Right.
But if he's dead, he can't be Yakir anything.
Correct. I'm just thinking of these horrible shilas where the father's in a coma when a baby is born and then the father dies. Is that Pishnayim? What does Yakir mean? What's the scope of him recognizing the child? I don't know, but I can't imagine that that's what it means, that, it's Hakara. I can't imagine. Says the Gemara of Hilchasa, Kechol Hani Lishni, the Amar Mar Bered Rav Yosef Mishmei de Rabba. We paskin like all of these cases. Basically, we paskin that if a woman is pregnant while the husband dies, and the husband had $1 billion Yerusha, doesn't go to the child. Not to that child, at least. If he has 3 other existing boys who predate the child who's in utero, they get the full Yerusha. That's it. But the child with whom she's pregnant, because the child's not born yet, pasuk state, they're just not allowed. It doesn't work. Halfway down, Amar Rav Yitzchak, Amar Rav Yochanan, HaMezakel Ubar Lo Kana. He says, I hold that Mezakel Ubar is Lo Kana. V'im Tomar Mishnah Seinu. What about our Mishnah? That seems to imply that an Ubar is Kona. Says the Gemara, Hol V'daito Shel Adam Krova Eitzel Beno. This is like the answer of Abaye earlier, that Yerusha is different. So it's just, I don't want you to trust my translation of this. I just want you to look at the Rashbam. The Rashbam is 7 lines, 8 lines into the wide lines. Krova Eitzel Beno. What does it mean? The Mezaka Ubar in our Mishnah is Chal. So says the Rashbam, V'gomar umakne b'chol libo. Aval ubar acher lo kana. Again, same question. Why is it that the mechanics of the kinyan are not governing? Why are we allowing this person's gamar umakne, his feelings of this is a complete kinyan? What is it, 110%? It's not just you did the maisa, like this is hilchos kinyanim, like did you do the action? So when it comes to a father and a son, we say gamar umakne afal pi that it's an ubar, so you're mezakil ubar for your child. But if it's Aunt Betsy to the great grandniece, that's zero. Again, it's like a little outside of my brain's function. I don't understand how we make this gamaru makna. What if I'm gamaru makna to the other kid? So says the Gemara, no dice. Mishnah Seinu is hol v'daito shaladim krova etzel beno. It's a din in a child, and I understand that the emotional component of pashut. I understand it. What I don't understand is why the mechanics aren't governing and overriding how we define a kinyan. Amar le Shmuel Rav Chana Bagdata. Shmuel says to Rav Chana from Baghdad, Pok Aisili Be Asara. Go find me 10 people. The Emarloch Be'apai, when I will say out loud in front of them, Hamizake Le'ubar Kana. I'm gonna put my foot down and I'll bet every last dollar on it. And not one word later do we see that he's wrong. And we're gonna build you up and we're gonna tear you right back down. And it's lo kana. Gemara now tells the story. Complex. A man says to his wife, they're married, but they don't have kids yet. Nichsi, my properties, livni diyahavu liminach, will be to the children that I have from you. All the children that you and I, this was his second marriage, okay? So Chaim used to be married to Chanala, and now they're not married anymore. Now Chaim gets married to Rachel. Great, they just get married. Rachel's they're dating. They get married, and he says, all of my nechasim, Rachel, are going to go to our children. Asa break shisha. One of the boys from the Chanala marriage comes up and says, hello, hi, what about me? Omar le, au gavra, my tehavi. What about this guy? Namely, what about me? Don't leave me out. I'm still your son. Why are you giving all the nechasim to your children from your marriage with this new wife, with Rachel? What? Tati, what about me? So Amar le, zil kani kechad mibra. You can get an inheritance with all of the kids that I have with this new wife too. So this is very difficult. Says the Gemara, Hanach, the children of the future, Vadai lo kana. De'akati lesnehu. You can't say today at hour -0, like you're -10, you have no children yet, and you're saying that those children are good. You can't say that. De'akati lesnehu, they're not there. But the son from the original marriage of Chaim and Chanaleh, is cholek letalia b'makom benaya. Does he, the word talia means like a young person. So this guy, let's call him Mordechai. So Mordechai shows up. He's like, but what about me? Do we say that he's cholek b'makom benaya, that he's going to split with other kids? O lesle, or would we say he's not lesle cholek letalia b'makom benaya? Does he really end up benefiting from the Yerusha with other children? Yes or no? This Mordechai from the first marriage. This is a big machlokas with many shitas lekanu lekan, but at least it's listed cleanly. Rav Avin, Rav Mesha, Rav Yirmiyah, de Amre is cholek letalia b'makom banya. Yes, that Mordechai will get with some of the other boys. He'll get some of the Yerusha. Rabbi Abahu, Rabbi Chanina Bar Papi, Rabbi Yitzchak Nafcha, de Amre less cholek letalia b'makom banya. Obviously a difficult case emotionally as well. Not so simple. Amar le Rabbi Abo. Rabbi Abo was in the latter camp who says that that Mordechai gets nothing, and he says Rabbi Yirmiyah who's in the previous camp who says he gets something. Hilchasa kavasan or hilchasa kavasaychu? Is the halacha like us or is the halacha like you? So look at this answer. Amar le pshita de hilchasa kavasan. Obviously the answer is like us. Why? De kshishna minaychu. We're older than you. B'lav hilchasa kavasaychu. But the halacha is not like you. The dar de kiasun. You guys are a bunch of children. So this young whippersnapper of an Amora says back to him, Amar le, midi bikshishusa talia milsa. Does it matter how old you are? Doesn't it just matter what the din is, what the halacha is? Okay, so you're older. That doesn't make you right. I mean, I'm going to respect you, but it doesn't make you right. They're both Amoraim. So says the Gemara, it shouldn't be that way, but time Atalia Milsa. It should be halacha l'maisa that we, okir harim. Which intellectual answer is correct? Let's figure it out. But don't tell me you're older. That's not an answer. It says the Gemara, but time amai. What is the reason why we would have thought like you? He says, Zil gabe de Rabbi Oven. Go back to the base medrash and talk to Rabbi Oven. De asparta nehale. I spoke to him about this idea. This is what Rabbi Abahu said. Rabbi Abahu said, I spoke to him. V'charkish ba reisha be medrasha. And he shook his head. Says the Rashbam. Hod lidvarai. He agreed with me. I don't care how old you are. I have a psak from a posek. So Azal legabe, he went. Rav Yirmiyah went to go talk to Reb Oven. That's what the Gemara says. And Amar Le, kani kechamor mikani. If I would have said I'm going to make a kinyan of a Yerusha, me and the donkey, would that have worked? Of course not. Rhetorical question. Question mark, exclamation point. Of course not. Now the Gemara explains what he meant by that line of the donkey. To Itmar, Kuf Mem Gimel Amud Aleph, 3 lines down. Kani kechamor, if a person says, I'm going to make a kinyan of this Yerusha, along with a donkey, who's obviously not next of kin, says the Gemara, lo kana. What about at v'chamor? What does this mean if we actually have this case? Rav Nachman Amar Kana Mechza. Rav Nachman says, if I say that you and a donkey get the kinyan, so then you get half. Rav Hamnuna Amar Lo Amar Klum, you're talking gibberish. You can't say that the Yerusha is going to be a kinyan with a donkey. Any kind of kinyan can't be with you. You can't be mizaka things to a donkey. They have no bailus. They have no anything. They have no nothing. They can't be yoresh. Rav Sheshes Amar Kana Hakol. Amar Rav Sheshes Mino Aminullah, that I can tell you that if the language is at v'chamor, that it's Kana Hakol. Because the Tanya says the Gemara, Reb Yosi Omer, Ein lecha mar v'kishos el panimi shebo. The bitter part of the word kishos is a little difficult to know exactly what it is. It's some type of vegetable like a squash or like a cucumber, maybe different pshatim. So it says the Gemara, the bitter part of this kishos is the inside. Lefichach kshehu torem, when you're doing truma, you need to be mosef ala chitzon shebo v'torem. You need to add some of the outside, which has a better flavor than the bitter inside. Amai, why would that be true? At v'chamor, why would that even count? After all, it's at v'chamor. You're being torem, that which tastes good, the outer part of the fruit, with the inner part, which is the bitter part of the fruit. You can't be torem ra al yafeh. You're not allowed to do that. But we see that it's an acceptable truma. So now we see at v'chamor is koneh. Very good. That's how Rav Sheshes answers up his question, because he said, Mino aminala, how do I know that at v'chamor is still koneh? He says, I'll show you. I'm being torem ra'im chamor, ra'im yafeh with the kishos, and it works. Says the Gemara, apples and oranges. You can't compare our case of Kenyan, Rav Sheshes, where you hold, seemingly for no good reason anymore, where you hold that you're going to be koneh in a case of at v'chamor, and you can't learn it from the case of kishos. Why not? Because, says the Gemara, about 10 lines down, shiny hasam, the case of the truma is different. The mida oraisa, truma ma'al yasahi. Even if you're torem ra al yafeh, it's still going to be a truma ma'al yasa. Amar Rabbi La, minayin l'torah min hara ala yafeh shetruma. So truma, you're right, you shouldn't do it. But mida oraisa, if I'm torem raw vegetables against truma that is good vegetables, you're yotze mida oraisa shneimar. So says the Gemara, you can only have the iser if there's an element of kedusha. What does that mean that there's kedusha? Obviously, there's something real happening over here. You did the wrong thing. You shouldn't have done it. But lemaisa, it actually works. And Amar le Rav Mordechai le Rav Ashi, Masi Rav Avya tiyufta. Rav Avya asks a bomb kasha against this idea. Maisa b'chamesh nashim. Story with 5 women. Uvahen, of the 5, shtei achayos. You have 2 sisters. You got Rachel and Leah, the sisters, and then you have 3 other women. You've got Chana, you've got Shprinza, and you've got Zelda. The liket, I don't know what that was. I don't know. Sorry. Somebody. The liket echad kalkala shel te'enim. One person gathered a basket of figs. Some of it was theirs, and some of it was shvius. Amar, and somebody said, Hari kulchen mikudashos li b'chal kolazos. All of you are married to me with this kalkala, basically. Hare aten mikudashos li b'kal kolazos kedas Moshe v'Yisrael. So the Rishonim here explain how that's even possible if it was shelahen, and the answer is the Rashbam gives is that they kind of, because it's Tav of Tandu, they want to get married. So the four will be koneh while the one gets married, and then they keep. There's like a behind the scenes cycle to make sure that someone doesn't own it at any one time. And then vikibla achas mehen al yedei kulan, and one said, "Oh, sure, we're in," and they accepted the kalkala. They took the ring, they took the basket. Amru chachamim ein achayos mikudashos. The sisters are not married because that's usher. The sisters can't be married to the same man. But all the other three women, Shprinza, Zelda, and whatever the other person's name was, I can't remember, they're all married. Look at this beautiful diuk. Achayos hu de'ein mikudashos. Hanachrios mikudashos. The other women, the non-sisters, are married. How can you say that? Ve'amai ad v'chamorhi. You're making a kinyan with that which is viable and that which is not. How can you say that? Amar le, he responded, and this was Rav Ashi responding to Rav Mordechai. He says, Hainu dechazoy Rav Huna bar Avia bechelma. This must have been what he dreamt of the other day. To Mosiv Rav Avia to Yuvta, that he asked this question. Lav miukimna. This case is different. He said his hare at differently, and we're going to close with this. He said hare mekudeshes li b'kal kalazu kedas Moshe v'Yisrael. To Amar haru yamikem libia tiskadeshli. Only those who I'm allowed to marry, the ones I'm allowed to cohabit with, are the one. Okay, Pashat, that's excluding the sisters. That's a pasuk in Chumash. He cannot sleep with women who are sisters. That's not allowed. So it says the Gemara, not a right that At V'Chamor doesn't work, because this case, the lashon of his Haret Mikudeshesli says only the ones that are Roi. So of course that makes sense then. So we'll stop right here and pick up with more of this on Shabbos. Wishing you all a beautiful night.